Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm Tim Dennis. You know, folks, over the last 16 years, we have talked about aliens, UFOs, UAPs, however you want to classify them these days. We've also talked about disclosure, and I think this is the type of audience that when we talk disclosure, you would more than welcome an alien on your, not only on your front yard, you'd probably invite them in the house, invite them in for dinner, and then ask to take their spaceship around the block afterwards. And with that, I came across a film and watched it last night, much to my delight, that asks the question, actually, if you believe that, first of all, if this is all true, but second of all, also introduces a lot of different scenarios. And what I liked about this movie is it stayed pretty balanced when it came to a skeptic can sit down and watch this movie and get an idea of some of the scenarios that would happen if alien life sat down right here, right now, and came forth with an agenda or different agendas. And it also came forth with a believer's agenda and introduced different believers in that. The movie is from J3 Films. It's called Extraordinary: The Revelations. And there are quite a few friends of the show that are in this movie, including Richard Dolan, George Norrie, just to name a couple. L.A. Marzulli is in it, and many, many more. I want to bring on at this time one of the main filmmakers, the director-producer of this movie. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to Darkness Radio, Jon Sumple. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Tim. How are you?
Doing good.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for this wonderful piece of film that you've put out. I want to mention your partners real quick, too. Jack Roth, who is the writer-producer, and Jamie Cernoff, who's the producer as well of Extraordinary: The Revelations. I want to get started with just a couple of ideas, and then let's launch into the film from there. You know, and I'm going to go backwards from where you went from the film, and then we'll go from there. Okay. You end the film talking about disclosure. And we had kind of a weird 2021 in that the U.S. government played with us a little bit. And I choose to use these words carefully, John. They played with us a little in what some people say is a soft disclosure, what other people think to say is a smokescreen of some sorts. That there are people at home that have shot video that is much better than what the U.S. government gave us in the grainy black and white footage that we got. Of course, we have explanation as to what that black and white video is, and I'll let you weigh in here in a second. But we got a little bit from the U.S. government as far as UAP went. And it was the beginning of the U.S. government starting to acknowledge that there are things that they can't understand that are not other countries' aircraft. Mm-hmm. I find it refreshing that the U.S. government is now starting to address this, maybe 13, 14 years too late. France and England have already addressed and wrapped it up. With that being said, I'm going to ask you outright, because it's left kind of open in the movie. Do you feel the U.S. is on its way to a full alien disclosure sometime before 2030?
I don't know if I would say that it's a full-blown disclosure. Based on the people that we interviewed in the third act of the film, it's kind of like they're slowly but surely changing the narrative from UFO to UAP, focusing primarily on technology, not on the sentient beings controlling that technology. No real acknowledgement in that capacity. So it appears that there's this slow drip and for the most part, societal acceptance of the fact that UAPs exist. And, you know, when 2017 New York Times article came out, you would have thought it would have been met with a huge applause and a lot of reaction. It was relatively quiet. It was not a huge, the door's open, let's burst through it. It was a slow acceptance. And I think part of the reason why is that social media over the last 20 years has presented an opportunity for people to witness imagery and video footage and opinion on a variety of different events around the world, so much so that until we get something that is really clear, we're going to be like, yeah, I've seen that before. Mm-hmm. Or I've heard that before. Mm-hmm. I've watched videos and movies, and there's so much content coming at us that we're kind of numb to something that is profound. It's got to be really profound. And, as Mary Rodwell says in the film, there are certain people that if a UFO landed in their front yard, they call it a fire truck because they do not want to know.
Right. Yeah.
So it really is, we're in that kind of slow drip, I think, of awareness and creating opportunities for the government, and I use that more of a globally, to control the narrative, to tell the story that they want to tell. So maybe we'll get comfortable over the course of the next several years with the idea of new technologies. And then the big question is, when do they introduce the whole idea of sentient beings controlling this technology? And how will that be presented? Will there be a new narrative surrounding that? There hasn't been a lot of acknowledgement to that.
Right. What I find interesting, though, is some people have the theory, and this was not brought up in the movie, and I give you credit for this, that it wasn't brought up into the movie. There are certain things that you didn't go to that are general standards that a lot of filmmakers go to that I think shut a lot of people's brains off when they hear this in a presentation. A lot of people go to the theory that, well, you know what, Hollywood has been involved with the government, and they were the ones to kind of do the soft introduction to conditioning us to think that we have a relationship with aliens, in that, and they point this out all the time, the close encounters theory with Steven Spielberg, right? That he worked along with the government to make aliens seem more friendly. Mm-hmm. The E.T. scenario, again, make aliens seem more friendly, that they're friendly to us, we're friendly to them. If we have an affection for aliens on the screen, then obviously the government can introduce them to us and we'll think of them more in that way. I'm glad you didn't go to that extreme. You didn't go to that theory. I guess the reason being is that it's easy to go there.
Right.
We have only so many topics we can cover in entertainment.
Right. And I think one of the things that we try to do and have done in our previous films as well is present interesting stories that people might not be exposed to. And when I say people, a lot of we've received some criticism in our previous films because people who are dyed-in-the-wool believers who've already taken a step, not even a step in the water, they're neck deep, maybe rolling around in it and believe. We're ultimately trying to reach the middle of the bell curve, as opposed to constantly show information that it isn't so much convincing. It's just that people who are already there, they want to see something that takes it further and a little bit deeper. And we think it's much better to have a discourse with a larger group of people than just with a fringe or someone who's in the shadows. So our approach to the filmmaking has been to take some of these fantastic stories, present them in a way that's a little bit more digestible and palatable, and kind of wrap around that whole question of what if it's all true. And I think if we come at it from that point of view, we have a much better chance of engaging a larger audience than going right to the conspiracy, dyed-in-the-wool, tried and true tropes that we've heard for decades. So it's intentional that we're trying to expose the story to a larger audience that might not have headspace for the deeper, I would say, rabbit hole content that's out there if you choose to consume it. So maybe what will happen is that people will be exposed to something like this as the way that we're presenting content and other providers are, and be curious to go and do the deeper dives on their own. That would be the big win. And for us, what we liked most of all when we screened the film, had the world premiere at the Pasadena International Film Festival. Mm-hmm. The moderator afterwards said that he was a film professor at one of the local colleges in Southern California. And he said this was like a master class in documentary filmmaking because it teased a lot of information that encouraged you one, to watch it more than once.
Right. Yep.
And two, go off and do your own research so that you can find out more. Whatever resonates with you, go and chase that.
I'm curious, and I want to get back to technology here for a quick second with you. So we're going to double back here. One of the things that was not teased in the film, maybe I would have liked to have seen, but I do understand between you and I why it's not in there. There is some teasing of technology, particularly having to do with Hitler in the 1920s with anti-grav technology and him seeking out some of these occult secrets. But what wasn't addressed was reverse technology, or governments using reverse technology, especially after Roswell or after downed UAPs or UFO, however you want to put it, were discovered. I want to ask you the question, why stay away from that specifically? Is it because the experts that you had, Clifford Stone, Ron Sherman, and so forth, is it because they didn't have specific sightings that had to do with taking that technology, or was it something else?
No, it was more because we try to limit our window of to an hour and 40-ish minutes.
Okay.
And it's a matter of focusing on, again, trying to reach that audience of, get them to the water, get them to dip the toe in the water, as opposed to scare them away with content that, or not necessarily scare them away, but get them to go kind of roll their eyes and go like, you had me until this.
Okay.
And that's definitely there. And I think there's plenty of opportunities to go with that. But our intention really with this film was to take you on a journey through time, from going back 40,000 years to the present day. And kind of like one of the themes throughout the film is the ticking. You hear ticking throughout the film. Yes. in the music in the background. And it's intentional because we're taking you on that journey through time and getting you to the present day to say that, well, there's been a presence here for at least 40,000 years based on cave drawings and imagery that we've seen over the millennia, all the way to present day sightings and actual government acknowledgement that we're tracking unidentified aerial phenomena, which is a huge step in the right direction. It's more a matter now of where does that step take us? Where do we go from here? Will there be acknowledgement of those things? And when you're trying to reach people who are maybe going to have a water cooler conversation after seeing a movie like this, it's best to keep them with the broad themes, because that engages them and allows them to be educated by people who know a little bit more. So if we wanted to go deeper dive, there are so many different rabbit holes to go down to kind of explore even further.
You brought up something interesting, and that is the music, the score behind the film. I found myself, it was subconscious until I realized, and I'm not going to bring up the actual moment in the film because it's a bit of a spoiler, but there comes a time where L.A. Marzulli is talking, and slowly but surely the music is coming up behind him for the big revelation having to do with aliens and us. Okay. And again, like I said, I'm not going to give the spoiler in this, but as L.A. is talking, I'm realizing the music has come up full bore, and he's about to give us the big reveal, and I'm like, holy cow, he's about to deliver a punch here. And I'm like, it was timed perfectly. It just the music with his big reveal, and I went, wow, it all ties together. You managed to, within 20 minutes of this movie, give us a biblical scholar, L.A. Marzulli, and everything else, and managed to tie in the Greeks, the Bible, aliens, and all this other things. And all of a sudden, bang, I just got a revelation, and I went, wow, there it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, music is a big part of, I take the music side of it extremely seriously, and to the point where Anton Patzner, who's our composer, and all the music is original. He does all the music for the film, but we sit down when we start the process of what the themes are going to be in the film, and I give him ideas, and then he goes off with those ideas and creates kind of like a textured palette. But once we have that palette and we know what that soundscape is going to be, it then becomes wait until we get the locked cut of the film, and then we go in minute by minute, and sometimes second by second, and say, this is what happens here. Here's what the music needs to do here. Here's some of the sound effects that need to happen here. Here's the emotion. Here's the pull. Here's here's where the silence should be. So yeah, it's definitely an enjoyable. I mean, I love doing the scoring side and working with composers because I'm always blown away by what they come up with. And we have heard nothing but positive feedback specific to the music in this film. So much so that we entered it into a few film festivals, the score itself, and it has been accepted in, I think, 4 different festivals, and it's won an honorable mention in one, and we're still waiting to hear on a couple of others. So that was something that I was really happy to do and hear about.
Yeah, it's quite a gift when you can, as a composer, take what's on the screen and hear that music in your head and then lay it together, and it becomes
it's crazy. I highly recommend people, watch the film once, and then watch it again with headphones on and focus on all the nuances of the sound. Mm-hmm. And also I should plug Anton a little bit more. The soundtrack for the film is available on I think it's on a variety of different platforms. It might be on Apple. It might be on, I know it's on YouTube Music, and it's likely on Spotify too. So if you just did a search for Extraordinary, The Revelations soundtrack, and Anton's name, Anton Patzner, you would find it. And my wife and I listen to it quite frequently because it's one of those things you like to have in the background. Mm-hmm. And not that it makes us sleepy, but it's just one of those good textural, thematic sounds to have to help you kind of ease into a nice deep sleep.
It is very layered. It has a very nice, layered, smooth sound.
Very proud of the work that Anton does. He's worked on all 3 of our films, and it just gets better and better.
Very much so. I want to bring up something, and again, I'm going to double back a little bit here. When we were talking about disclosure, and we were talking about how ready the U.S. public really is, I'll point out, as far as our audience goes, and I pointed it out at the beginning of the show, we have the kind of audience that I think, not overwhelmingly, but the majority probably would let, an alien in, have a little dinner, and ask if they could take the spaceship around for a ride. Right. There's probably a minority that would say, oh, no, Tim, I don't think I'd do that. I think I'd just let them sit out on the lawn, and I'd look at them through the window. But I think the overwhelming amount of our audience would be curious. They'd be open to the experience. Do you feel like the American public by now, in the year 2022, is at a point where, we've been bombarded with so much as far as science fiction, as far as being conditioned with news stories, as far as media coverage and programs, and even films such as yours, that at this point, we've not just been conditioned, but maybe even a little jaded to the entire thing, that, it's really not a big deal anymore.
Well, I think the bigger question is, I think a lot of people, when asked the question, do you know somebody who has seen a light in the sky? Very broad. A lot of people have seen the lights in the sky. Mm-hmm. Then you ratchet it down to the abduction experiences. Still quite a few people that have had those experiences. And I think one of the things that we've experienced over the last 10 years in making these films is more and more people are willing to come forward and tell their stories. Sometimes it's just as a pressure valve release, is that, thank you so much for making these films. I know I'm not alone, and that there's other people out there in the world just like me. Well, that's another reason for doing these films, because it gets the tribes together. It gets people to seek out guidance and help and support in helping them understand what they may have experienced. And the more and more we see this type of, I think, acceptance of these experiences, it becomes a condition. It becomes part of the human experience when we acknowledge it, to the point that when it does ultimately become something that is presented, for lack of a better word, that we may be more acceptable to it. And I think part of it, that, when you look at films like Star Wars and they show all the different creatures and everybody's living, harmoniously together, and everyone's one big happy family. That's very appealing. I think that's something that, my personal, kind of belief in all of this. We all come from the same space dust, and we all come from the same source. We're all brethren already. So why are we so afraid of something that we are a part of? And I think if we start to accept that the possibilities, we become less frightened by them. And not every single one of them, as the film explores through the ascension, biblical and colonization theories and paradigms, is that not all of them are bad. Some of them could be. And a lot of the movies historically have focused on a lot of the elements that are more scary, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a very positive thing.
I tell you, after the break, we're going to get into some theories in the movie that some people may find disturbing and some may think are just nature taking its course. But I do want to deal with the nature of human nature, because I believe that as far as Homo sapiens go, our nature isn't naturally to be accepting. And I want to ask you that question, Jon. Do you feel that as Homo sapiens, we are naturally predators and not as accepting as we'd like to say we are?
Very interesting question, and I think it's something that it begs the question: who came first? Are we a part of a, for lack of a better word, alien agenda project? Are we the petri dish, and they're exploring and monitoring? It's no different than what we as humans do as we explore and tag and research different species on the planet. Maybe we're part of that experiment. On the other hand, I think that there are large swaths of people who would embrace that. Other people, based on fear mechanisms, would be the primary reason that they would not be as accepting. So I think it's more a matter of what's causing that fear? Is it control? Is it something that if it changes something that they're used to and comfortable, it's a threat. And I think what we need to explore from the human experience is what causes the threats. Are the threats truly threats, or are they propaganda, creating this message in our mind that we need to be afraid? Because, like you said, we'll explore the paradigms in a bit, but it could be a very positive thing. Even if it is a colonization, maybe we integrate. Who knows? I don't know those answers, and I don't purport to know the answers. I just think the possibilities of any of these scenarios being the one, or maybe a combination of them all, is something worth exploring. And I'm assuming we'll talk about that a little bit more.
We will in just a few moments. As a matter of fact, in a few moments, we'll take our break. I'll just tell you why I set this up for you, why I kind of am teeing up the softball for you. There's always been two popular theories, and they are actually addressed in your movie in a roundabout way. One is that you have the peace and love camp, the ones that are willing to take in an alien presence, one that believes that aliens are here to advance our race and get us past ourselves, for lack of a better term. And there's the camp that I think thinks that an alien invader is here to assimilate us or has bad intentions.
Right.
So and that really speaks to the human condition. It speaks to what we are as a people. And if you look at us as a people, we really are split into two camps. We're split into the camps of, do we accept each other for who we are?
Correct. Yeah.
Or do we look at each other and we look down either the barrel of a weapon or a fist? And, do we try to conquer one another for material goods? And that's not a political statement. That just is what it is. That is what it's been throughout history.
Yeah, and you just go back through sociological and anthropological perspectives, is that it was the hunters and gatherers in protecting the family, the tribe. And usually the protection wasn't from other people. It was from the elements and from the animals, more so than outsiders. But if outsiders came, they were a threat because they wanted to steal your food, or your women, and going back thousands, tens of thousands of years. It was more about protecting, the family and collectively. It wasn't about like this threat of takeover, because your purview of your surroundings was the boundaries that you knew as far as you explored. And if you only knew of one other group or family or tribe in the area, you were either harmonious with them and integrated with them, or aware of each other's territories, or you weren't. So I think a lot of the human experience that we live today has been cultivated through control mechanisms, religious control mechanisms, political control mechanisms, territorial control mechanisms. And we either embrace those because they comfort us, or we rebel against them because they're inclusive. And it's better to be, I come from the mindset that I would rather be integrated galactically than isolated, territorially, on this planet, whether it be the planet itself, a continent, a state, a town, a neighborhood. I would rather it be open to us all integrated, embracing our true potential, because the control mechanisms are for people who want to stay in control, and the almighty dollar has a lot to do with that.
It's interesting you say that. I think the opinion of most people is I'd rather die next to my earthly brother than let somebody from another planet come in and take me over.
Well, if it truly is a takeover, I think all of us would take up arms to protect our own.
Right.
If we saw a threat, if there was someone at your door, pounding on your door, if you had access to a weapon, whether it be, a firearm, a baseball bat, a golf club, a chair, whatever that would be, you would fight to protect your territory. Mm-hmm. So that's the big question. What's the threat? Is it a threat, or is it an unknown?
Right. And that's the question. You know what? I think we'll take our break right there, because when we come back, we're going to jump into that, and we're going to determine whether UAPs, aliens, extraterrestrials, whatever it is we're seeing in the skies, are exactly that. Are they friendly? Have they been coming here for ages and ages with the idea that they're here to help? Are they here to integrate? Or are they here for more nefarious purposes? Our guest is Jon Sumple. He's part of J3 Films, and the film is Extraordinary: The Revelations, which you can get right now, not only at Amazon, but different outlets. And we've got links in the description of the show. Click on those links and be sure to watch the film more than once, because there's a lot of juicy things in there and a lot of things to make you think. So when we come back, we'll talk with Jon about, is it friendly? Is it assimilating? Or is it deadly? We'll talk about that next on the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I am Tim Dennis. We're talking aliens, extraterrestrials, UAPs, and the extraordinary, the revelations. That's the name of the film from J3 Films. Our guest is Jon Sumple, who is the writer and director of the film. And we're getting deep into it now, as we've been talking about. You're the director-producer, Jon, of the film.
It all works.
It all works.
Get my fingers in the pie. That's
right. You're deep into the film as well. We were talking before the break about what exactly these extraterrestrials, ETs, UAPs, UFOs are that are coming from the sky. And I want to talk a little bit about the history now, Jon, as we get into this part of the program. Now, in the film, it does address a lot of the history. You bring in a biblical scholar, you bring in historians, and there's the talk of course, you have to get into the Bible when you get into the first sightings of UFO. And you can cite the passage of the wheel within the wheel, You can also do something interesting, which I also do a talk on, which is UFO and Renaissance paintings, which is extremely interesting.
Right.
That they were
quite a few.
Quite a few. Yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah. So throughout history, there's the sightings of these craft, and they're even on cave paintings, as you point out in the film. Now, one of the things you mentioned before the break, which I think you did it in a roundabout way, but I'm going to flesh it out a little bit here. There is, in the history of man, you go from caveman to Cro-Magnon to a more formed version of human. Somewhere in there, there's an evolution where there's a missing link. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about that missing link for a second, because scientists can't quite nail it down where that missing link is. I want to ask you this question. In your mind, does that missing link have anything to do with these craft that we've been seeing throughout the ages?
Personally, not that we explore it too much in the films that we've done, but the research that I've done. And I should say, too, that I approach this more from a curiosity perspective than a dyed-in-the-wool, hardcore rabbit hole diving researcher. Okay. I have that with my partner, Jack Roth, and Lori Wagner, who's one of our producers. They are ingrained in have all the research at their fingertips. I know a lot more today than I did 10 years ago when I first started getting involved in this 12 years ago. But what I have tried to do from a storytelling point of view is to have that curiosity, to approach it from not with an agenda, but well, tell me more. I'd like to know more. What does that mean? Where does that take us? So through the research that I've done and things that I've looked at is the different races on this planet. Hasn't been enough time in evolution to have the differences that we have. So what gives? What happened there? So there's, and most people are going to be like, oh, what are you talking about? Well, if you dive deep into it and you do the research, and that this is on the societal and anthropological perspective, an archaeological perspective, there isn't enough time to show these differences in the different races on the planet. So what happened? Were they seeded? Were there mutations introduced? Have these, again, I go back to the Petri dish. Are we an experiment? I don't know. And I can say that everything that we present in the film, I don't know the answers, but we're trying to cultivate discussion based on theories and research and exposure to different things that people who have done heavy lifting their entire lives, the heroes, I think, are the ones who do the hard work and get criticized for it and scrutinized and ridiculed for it. They're the ones that are helping us all better understand the possibilities that our origins might not be from this planet, which creates a profound discussion on, where did we come from? How did we get here? And where are we going? And maybe this experience that we're having, this human experience that we're having with these entities from somewhere else, whether that's another place in the universe or a different dimension. We may be able to travel dimensionally, and we haven't evolved to the point where we understand that, and it could be as simple as that. But there is a lot of unknowns that if we ignore them, it's comfortable. If we explore them, it creates curiosity or fear. I think there's a lot of people who would rather just turn a blind eye and I believe what I believe. And my response to that is that's great, because people who believe in the UFO phenomena believe what they believe, and that's their faith. So depending on what path you take, based on the research that you do, the information that you're provided with, you form your own opinions and you belief systems and structures as a result of that. But that doesn't mean that we know what the truth is. We're following a specific paradigm based on a belief system that we've been introduced to, indoctrinated with, or that we simply believe, based on our experiences and interactions with the information that's presented to us. So I always like to challenge people to just think outside the box and say, well, what about a different alternative? Does this resonate with you? And I think a lot of people, when they are exposed to some of these things, they realize, wow, I can be religious and also believe in UFOs. Okay, this is going to help me better frame this. And it takes you down a completely different path. Although I wouldn't say that LA and Timothy Alberino are necessarily coming at it from a religious perspective. They're coming at it from a biblical narrative perspective, which is very, very different.
True. And having spoke to LA in the past, I have a feeling he doesn't line up on the, how should I put this? On the light side of things.
No. Well, that was an interesting part of the filmmaking process. We went in knowing that we were going to talk about the three paradigms: the biblical paradigm, the ascension paradigm, and the colonization paradigm. And we intentionally asked each one of the people that we interviewed about the other paradigms. And we introduced some of that in the film, but we didn't there's not a lot of love amongst all three of those for the other part.
Right.
Richard Dolan says in the film he sees the love and light in the biblical paradigm as two sides of the same coin. They're just coming at it from a different perspective.
True.
He leans into a little bit more of what Dr. Jacobs talks about, because he says the work has been done by Jacobs and several other people who have done that heavy lifting in the research on the regression therapies, and the information is, in the way that Dolan talks about it, is a little bit more credible because there's some work that's been done around it. The other ones, not as much. But that doesn't mean that one's right and the other ones are wrong. But the people who believe in those verticals and paradigms will point the finger at the other ones and say, yeah, they don't get it. Mary does that to Dr. Jacobs. LA does that to Mary. And there's a little bit of the, you sit in a camp, you don't kind of put your 1 foot in each one. It's just kind of hard to do that.
Very true. But in that, they somehow find a common truth in there. Odd as it seems, they all do find a common truth.
Yeah, the one thing that what I think is great about this, and one of the reasons why we wanted to present this, is as we were talking to different people over the last several years, the common thread in each one of these three paradigms is that they believe in lights in the sky, they believe in sentient beings operating them, they believe in abductions, they believe in hybridization programs, and they believe in hybrid beings. They all three of them believe those very important things are all common with all of them, but the outcomes, the end games, are very, very different.
They are, and I want to talk a little bit about those end games, and I let's go over them a little bit. One of the things that I do know, and I don't know if I buy into, are alien human hybrids. Believe me, I've met some people in my day, John, that I could believe might either come from another planet or might actually be an alien human hybrid. But then, you have physical scientific tests that you would think would tell you that these people are not of this earth. I know automatically I'm going to get emails that say, well, Tim, blood type, this, that, the other, that should be able to tell you that, that
there is no conclusive evidence in any of that.
Right.
There's no conclusive evidence that the people that we have discussed this concept with and featured in our films, that I'm not trying to belittle them or downplay, but we don't know. And I don't know if any of the stuff that we've presented in our films, I don't know if it's true. I just don't know. And I am not an experiencer myself. I've seen craft when I was younger, but I have never had any abduction experiences that I can recall or even attempted to kind of uncover. So my curiosity is, well, why do all these other people have these experiences? What is it to them? So instead of looking at them and saying that they are not truthful or they don't understand, I look at it more from the perspective of, I don't understand it, but maybe I can learn something from somebody who has been through that. At the very least, I can empathize with them if they've had something that's traumatic that's happened with them. So, there are people who there are two camps that, there's nothing negative about this. I know the Edgar Mitchell Free Group, they're like, it's all positive.
Right.
These abduction experiences are all positive. We've talked to hundreds of people who have not had positive experiences. That doesn't mean that they are all positive or all negative. It's probably a little bit of both.
I have to ask you this, Jon. I take it you've spent hours and hours talking to Dan Sherman. And the one thing he says in the film, if I remember this right, is that he was born and groomed to do what he does, which is communicating with aliens.
Mm-hmm. So the one of the things that Dan was a tough interview, not because he wasn't willing to talk. It was what he was willing to talk about, and not talk about. Part of his in the interview, as we were talking with him, he says, "Well, a lot of this is in my book. So read my book."
Oh, I hate that
type of thing.
Yeah.
So, and we were prepared for that, but it was more a matter of, we couldn't, each one of the three people, Lynn, Dan, and Clifford, we could have spent, 20 minutes, half hour, an hour on each. We could do a movie on each of them.
Right.
But we wanted to the message with the three of them was that these are people who have been involved in the government who were specifically tied to programs connected to alien beings. And with Dan and also with Clifford, there was the discussions were that they were most likely their mothers were part of a program, and they were introduced through alien DNA. I'm not quite sure of all the details, but somehow they were selected, nurtured, monitored, and when the time came, selected and told this is what your job is. And Dan details that in his book, that when he was first alerted to this, it all came at him out of the blue, unbeknownst to him, didn't know any of it, and it just was something that he had to process, and immediately was moved into a special program. But his story is a fascinating one because of how much he does share and is able to share through his book. And it gives you some insight into the mindset of somebody who comes from the military, who is groomed through the military, who has the mindset of, what secrecy is and isn't, and what I can and can't talk about, and knowing that if I go too far, I could wind up in jail or worse. So there's very much a cautious approach to how far do you go and what can and can't you share. And somebody like Clifford, on the other hand, shared a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think that the bigger thing with him was, do you believe him, or is there, people going out of their way to discredit what he says? And not a lot of people did. There wasn't a lot of pushback from the military. And the one thing that I would say, listening to a podcast or a radio show or watching a movie doesn't give you the insight that you gain when you sit down and spend hours or sometimes days with people who've had these experiences, because you're with them in the moments, the quiet time. Those moments where they look at you and they're kind of like, do you believe me? Do you think I'm crazy? Those are the type of things where when you spend that time with them and you see the impact that their personal experiences have had on them emotionally, not necessarily breaking down, but they're guarded in some cases. They're very they isolated because not a lot of people can relate to them. Right. Therefore, as much as they can try to share their stories, we can, if we haven't been on their side of the equation, we can only guess or disbelieve what they might be sharing. So we've been fortunate that we've spent hundreds of hours with people who've had profound experiences to say, I can say that I may not understand what happened to them, but there's no doubt in my mind that they've had something profound happen to them.
Don't you think, Jon, in Dan or Clifford's instance, more Dan's than Clifford's, don't you think in their instance, not that they have anything to prove, because they've already worked in their positions, they've already had the biggest of top secret clearance to do what it is they do, But don't you think for the rest of the world, they would want to say, I'm an alien human hybrid, and this is how I know, and give you some sort of
I don't know if they
proof.
believe that, though. It's almost like, especially when we were talking with Dan, the way that Dan talked about it. I mean, I think part of it was he was kind of groomed to be in the military. He was in the military. He had been through, I guess, what most people go through. There's a little bit of brainwashing once you go into the military to kind of prepare you for, fighting alongside your brother or sister to make sure that you protect the line, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So there's this conditioning that they go through mentally. And I think that you either accept it or you don't. And if you don't, you're not there. So there's a level, I think, of acceptance that I'm here to do something. I don't quite know what it is, but I'm here to accomplish something. And in having the conversation with Dan, I wouldn't say that he was stoic, but there was no emotion. He was not emotional about what he experienced. He was very straightforward. This happened to me. This is what happened. This is what I did. This is what I'm aware of. And this is what people need to know. And very straightforward. Whereas Clifford, on the other hand, very emotional. This has been hard, very hard for him.
Well, it was almost like he was experiencing empathy for his people. That's the way it came across. Yeah,
it does. It absolutely does. There's this awareness, that when he says that in the beginning of it's like if we're all in this, if we're all of the same, there's no reason to be pointing guns at them. Why, if there are guests, why are we pointing guns at them? Why are you referring to them as guests if we're worried about them? Why are we fearful of our guests? So, and I think, in his situation, it was, he must have had some sort of gift that they identified early on and leveraged. And he was very emotional with his engagement and the process. And I think part of it, what really works well with Clifford's storytelling is that he comes across as very next door neighbor, guy next door type of person that you can relate to. He's very relatable.
Yeah.
Dan has that. You get the feeling that you're talking with somebody who's been in the military when you're speaking with Dan. Clifford, not so much at all. And the same with Lynn. Lynn Buchanan is the same way. He knows how far he'll go, and he's not going to let you know anything that he can't talk about. And you almost kind of want to come on, just to give it a little nugget, just a little one. Then they would laugh, and that was about as far as we were able to get with some of the pushing the envelope. But more and more people are sharing their stories as they get older, and I think that as some of those stories come out, they're worthy of exploration and consideration. And I just feel like where we are in the world, the awareness, the exposure to content is just intensified so much that we are being conditioned to, here you go. And oh, okay. Not surprised. I get it. Versus, if in the 40s and 50s and 60s, even with the Cold War, it was always the fear of the threat. The threat was the enemy. And I could understand the desire to kind of keep it quiet. But today, what do we lose by sharing? I think there's more to gain, quite honestly. There will be mayhem because certain people that based on their belief structures might have a problem with it. But when you have the Roman Catholic Church coming out and making comments about the fact that we may not be alone in the universe, they're setting the table.
Well, not only that, they've offered to baptize any alien that comes forward. I mean, that's pretty bold.
They have a whole observatory that they scour the skies themselves. So they're in the game too.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of different before and that was actually, I wanted to go there eventually and talk about Clifford and Dan. I did want to add one. I don't know that I should go back and add this, but maybe I will. Maybe I will, John. The one thing that kind of got me while I was watching the film was, if Clifford and Dan are alien human hybrids, it's kind of, I don't know why the whole prove it thing comes up to me, but the one thing that got me, you were talking with the remote viewers, and they were constantly having to prove themselves for senators and for for heads of state. To me, I didn't hear those stories out of Clifford and Dan.
Well, I think based on what my conversations and our conversations before we in the screening calls that we had, and even when we finally sat down and talked with them, I don't think either one of them believe that they're hybrids. I believe that there's something they feel like there's something unique about them.
Just a gift?
Some sort of some sort of switch that might have been switched on in their DNA that allowed them to be more in the case of Dan Sherman, communication skill set.
Okay.
That he cultivated through training, but that he had the gift, whatever that might have been. And in Clifford's case, it was, I think, an empathy. There's an empathy gene in there with him that is unlike, other people, I would say, that are in the military. Maybe, I don't, and this is just my own supposition that, maybe it's a matter of if we're all looking at them as threats and Clifford's not, maybe Clifford, not that one man can balance the equation, but it provides a different perspective, from the human experience if there's somebody who's truly empathetic in a controlled environment in the way that a military would always want to control it. They don't want something that they don't understand to get out of their control until they fully understand what they're dealing with.
Understandable. I want to switch gears a little bit back to the actual theories of why these extraterrestrials are here, or if they are here, as you put it in the movie, and if they are here, what their agenda is here for. I want to start on the lighter side with the fact that they're here to help us. And I want to get your opinion on that side of things. If they're here to actually help advance our civilization. I want to start with this question. If they're here to help advance our civilization, I think, one, we're doing a pretty crappy job of holding the line and trying to advance ourselves.
I agree.
And two, don't you think they're doing a pretty crappy job of trying to keep us from harming ourselves? And why is there not more interference on their end?
Yeah, there seems to be in the current day, over the last, I would say, 15 years or so, the de-evolution of humanity to a certain extent because of the this polarization, global polarization about what's right, what's wrong, who's right, who's wrong, who to follow, who not to follow. And if you don't believe in the camp that opposes you, that you're wrong. And I think that is not a good place for us to be. And if you look at historically, there have been many civilizations that have imploded as a result of this type of, getting to this boiling point. Not to say that we're headed there. I think we're a lot more advanced than some of these other civilizations. The Roman Empire is a very big one that kind of pops into your head. Even the British Empire over the course of the last 200 years or so. Has retreated in quite a big way. And I think that there is this mindset too from the U.S. being the big and powerful, that everybody falls in line behind that. And a lot of storytelling comes from the United States. And we've had people ask us, well, why are all these abduction cases in the United States that are the ones that are featured the most? And they're everywhere. And one of the things that is a little bit of a tangent, but I've been traveling for the last 3 years, and I spent a lot of time in Mexico, in South America during that time, and spent a lot of time with indigenous cultures and people who have ancestors from tribes. And every single one of them that I spoke to, I would ask questions about the sky people, and they all had stories. They all had oral histories that related to the sky people. This is not based in I would say things that have been documented. This is oral history based on they've been here. They've been a part of our culture for thousands of years. We're aware of them. We've integrated with them. They share information with us. We embrace it. And these cultures have a long history with the sky people. And why are we not willing to do the same? And I think part of the reason why, and talk about this briefly in the film, is that the mindset of people going back 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 years, even 200 years, was very different than it is today. Scientifically, we understand a lot more. But back then, what did they know about the cosmos? Mm-hmm. It was very, very limited. It was limited to what they saw. And they saw stars in the sky. They documented the stars. They followed the stars. They told stories about the stars. They made gods out of the stars. And they probably had experiences with lights in the sky. So that's all they knew. They didn't think about it from a science fiction point of view. They didn't think about it as other worlds, light years away. This was never their perspective. It was very simple. So they didn't have to worry about, the cosmology that we understand today, which is they could be a threat. They might have been just there to help and guide.
Yet you have to ask yourself the question, were they or were they not a threat? I mean, obviously there were interactions that were written down in tomes like the Bible and in other such literature.
A lot of documentation,
right,
historically,
but not translated by us as alien interactions.
I think because we can't put our minds in the space of the people who documented it at that time. And I think one of the things that's mentioned in the film too is that they documented what they saw. They didn't build stories around it. It was just what they saw. Mm-hmm. There was probably less fear and more curiosity because they didn't see it as this intergalactic being a threat. It wasn't seen that way. It is what it is. It's this thing in the sky that comes and visits us. So we don't have that mindset. We're so far beyond that and think that, because this exists, there has to be some ulterior motive.
Right.
And why is it? And if there isn't an ulterior motive, why is it being kept from us? It's being kept from us either for our own good, because it's a threat. What is ultimately the reason why? And I think, you talk about the love and light and the ascension side of it. If it truly is something, and I think so many people want to embrace that because it's positive, it feels good.
Sure.
And if that truly is the case, though, my question to that would be, well, why haven't they been a little bit more forward?
Right.
Why is it, and why is it all women leading the charge? Why are there not more? It's the majority of women. Mm-hmm. And what does that tell you? Is it a matriarchal thing? Are we being prepared for something that is very different from what we've experienced on this planet from more of a patriarchal perspective? These are the type of things that I love having these conversations because they're unknowns, but they're things that we should at least think about. Because what if, again, it comes back to the question we use all the time: what if it's true?
That's an excellent question, and you are right. I mean, it's a more matriarchal point of view that these alien beings are here to take care of us. And if they are, what we're waiting for some huge event to happen in order for them to swoop in and save humanity. But look at the big events that have happened. Mm-hmm. And what is it going to take? I mean, are we going to be on the edge of cleaving the planet in half before they show up? I mean,
it will be. A lot of people have said that the atomic bomb was what brought them back. That's why all of a sudden in the late 40s, this presence became known, because we were going to undo this grand experiment that they were undergoing with this planet very quickly with this atomic weaponry. So that's why they appeared and showed up. So maybe there is some truth to that. Maybe up until then, it was all about guiding and helping and being partners and providing you with technology or resources that allowed you to do amazing things with rocks and the different cultures around the world, where you're kind of like, how is that even possible? And we can't even replicate today some of the things that were built thousands of years ago. So that's the head scratching stuff to me, is like, well, they were there to help, but where are they now? Are they waiting for something? Are we is TV part of the problem? Documenting is too easy, whereas in the past, again, the questions that you could ask and the exploration that you can go on and the curiosity, I think, that is healthy, allows us to look at the possibility that they are here to help. But then Dr. Jacobs would say that they're here to colonize, and we're the unfortunate residue.
Well, now that brings up the next point that I wanted to bring up, which is integrating before they eventually take over, and integrating by essentially becoming a hybridization, for lack of a better term, a hybridization program where we're eventually squeezed out, which brings about a bit of promise and a bit of fear. That does lend to our fear centers, that they're coming in, and that does kind of bring about the whole abduction, probing, taking our women, so to speak.
Right.
And
I think I remember when the first Matrix film came out, and Keanu Reeves made the comment that the Matrix is a documentary, more of a thing. So, and when you talk to the biblical paradigm, they will say the AI is a big part of the second coming. The whole idea that you take a mark, and the mark is this technology, and the technology is really what is preparing us to kind of be revealed. So in where Jacobs talks about it, it might not necessarily be that all of a sudden these beings are going to just populate the earth and we're going to be either their food source or their slave colony, whatever that might be. It could be technology, the technology that is evolving. And, we're talking about metaverses and living online, having two lives. And that's within our grasp. That's within the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. That, there are pieces of land selling for millions of dollars in a virtual world, because people want to lay claim to the prime real estate in these new spaces, and we can't comprehend what that world is going to look like. But it's in our lifetime, and is that part of that integration? Is it technology, and who seeded the technology? So that's a part. It might not necessarily be these reptilian beings, walking the planet. It could be as simple as something as technology becomes pervasive and squeezes out the like Wall-E. We're sitting in a chair with a tube in our mouth and sitting on a monitor all day long. That's scary. That's some scary stuff, because it's totally unlike what we're used to in the evolution of humanity on the planet up until this point.
You just sent a chill down my spine. I know that much. Considering how much time I spent on this device alone today that you and I are talking on, that sends a chill down my spine. And without going too far down the rabbit hole to get to the big reveal in the movie, which I don't want to do, talk of a hybrid age, like you just mentioned, with machines and AI. I know between you and I, John, and the rest of the audience, I'm of a mind right now where the majority of my body's broken down, from spine to neck to hip to knees to ankles.
I feel you.
Yeah, and I've got a condition called Charcot foot, where my leg went through my ankle and my foot, and wow. I wear not a prosthetic, but an orthotic boot called a crow walker boot. So if somebody came to me today, or even an alien showed up on my doorstep and said, we can fix that. We can put you in some sort of a device where, or get you a new spine, or even provide you with a new body that we can transfer your consciousness tomorrow, and you could have a new body, but it would involve some sort of AI.
Right.
It might be a little attractive.
I can see that, because I think that, this whole idea of these metaverse realities is I can be that perfect being in the metaverse, or I can be a character. I can be an icon. I can be beautiful. I can be silly. I can be whatever I want to be that I'm not here. I can represent I can represent my best self in this alternate reality, whatever that best self might be. So whatever we're lacking in the real world, we may look for in the virtual world as a replacement. That's a scary thought. Mm-hmm. When people are going to be, I remember when Second Life first kind of came out back in the early 2000s, and there were people who were running home from work because they could not wait to get on their computers and live in this virtual world.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to some people that were like, it was like a cult, and I had to break free from it because I enjoyed my Second Life more than I did my real life. That is haunting. And it again begs the question, who planted the seed? Where is that coming from? Is that coming from, and it's one of the things that we addressed a little bit in the last film that we did. Richard Dolan brought up Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay Circles, and we use it as a theme throughout the film of every time we expand our knowledge, the circle of awareness expands and understanding expands, exponential more questions arise. And when you think about where we were 40,000 years ago, mm-hmm. that circle was awfully small compared to what it is today. But at the same time, 5,000 years from now, our circle today is going to be very small in comparison. So what we don't know is just as, I think, daunting as what we do know. Because where we're going to go in the next, I've brought this up before, in I think it was the late 1900s or the late 1800s that the head of the patent office in the U.S. made the comment that everything that ever needs to be invented is already done. It's already here. It was like we're at the pinnacle of human advancement and technology and industrial revolution. And if you have that mindset, you're not prepared for what's next. And I think that we need to have a very open-minded approach to where this goes from here, because I just feel that what we don't know and what we find out over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years, it may be interdimensional. And we may realize that we can travel from one end of the universe, to the other by going through like one of the doors in the hallway of the Matrix. It could be that simple. But those are the things I think that are within our grasp, is this understanding of quantum physics and dimensional realities. And those are things that we're on the precipice, I think, of learning about, which I think will open, the doors to understanding a lot of the things that may or may not be happening today, both from an extraterrestrial perspective, but also why are we at this point? Where do we go from here?
That's a very good question. I have one last one to ask you before we wrap up today. Since you've released this film, we've launched the James Webb Space Telescope, which mm-hmm. is supposed to change the way that we see how the universe has developed, and it is supposed to teach us new things about this universe. From your perspective as a filmmaker and these questions that we're hoping to answer, what if you had time and with that telescope, what are the questions that you would like to answer with that telescope? What would be the first thing you would look for?
I think to me, I would look for the origin story. So, and I think maybe it's because I find this more comforting and easy to digest, is that, whether it's the Big Bang Theory or something else, whatever it might be, there's an origin. It all started from somewhere. And if it truly was a mass in an atom and this expansive explosion, that means everything came from that. We all came from that. The existence of the universe is expansive as it is, and we can't comprehend how expansive it is. It all came from somewhere. And I feel like in the same way that you and I are having a conversation with technology across the miles, maybe mm-hmm. it's as simple as that we have the ability to experience the universe in the same way, but we just haven't tapped into it yet. So my curiosity is more about where did we come from? And the journey that we're on is, I think, a journey of discovery and a journey of awareness. And when we kind of take it and internalize it, it's more about what's happening inside. I would say the awareness within, my awareness of self, and my place in this galactic existence, more so than what somebody else is telling me. I think if we all started to go internal and spent less time listening to something else, that harmonic convergence might be a very positive thing, because people would probably shed the shells of what they've been led to believe if they truly listen to what's inside, and not, what's been dictated or presented or propagandized to them, over millennia.
Interesting.
It's the great human experiment, and I think, I would like to think that there is a. You point the telescope to this one area, this needle in the haystack area, and the Creator is there, and the Creator is like, you got me, you found me. Here are the answers. That would be profound.
He drops his Hershey bar and goes, "Whoops."
Yep.
Yeah, that would be something. I would love for something to happen with the James Webb Space Telescope where we accidentally pointed it at a zone where we had those Goldilocks planets, and you actually saw something flying around or leaving that zone and headed towards us. I would love to see something like that where we could finally go, it's right there.
I think it could be as simple as a signature, a moving signature that is unexplained. I mean, the look up in the sky, or the up in the sky, don't look up. That whole idea of they found something and they showed it moving. If we were able to do that, light years away, and seeing that this is not a scientific anomaly, this is a for lack of a better word, man-made element moving through. That's all we need.
Yep.
I think that's all we need, is to know that somewhere else out there, there's something like us doing similar things and wondering the same things.
Yep.
That's all it takes.
I think that'd be perfect. And then in that, I think everyone could just drop their airs and be okay.
Yeah.
I think that would be fine.
And I think it starts with conversations like this. I think it starts with, having shows like yours that encourages that thought and that conversation in a way that isn't, there's a lot of shows out there that their intention is to throw red meat to their audience, that just more of what they love. I like this format with you because this is a conversation, and this is, we're asking questions, we're asking some deep stuff. We're trying to ponder that existence in a way that, if more people just set aside a little bit of time, if you're listening to this episode and it's resonating with you, have a conversation with someone about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to do Tim a huge solid here and say, share this episode with that person that you're like, if only they could understand what's going through my head. And if this resonates, share this episode with them. And then have that conversation about, gosh, let's talk about stuff like this. Because we do. Jack and I do this all the time. Yeah. We have these conversations about the big picture, the why we're here, where did we come from, and where do we go when we're gone from this existence. Those are profound things that we should all be curious about. But yet we're on a hamster wheel based on a paradigm that has been foisted upon us, and we're stuck in it. And until you step off and start asking those questions and having those conversations with people who feel the same thing, who've stepped off the hamster wheel, who've unplugged from the matrix, so to speak, and willing to challenge that, these conventional beliefs and structures that we've been led to believe is what we're supposed to do, we challenge them. Step out of it.
Exactly. The Jack that Jon is referring to is Jack Roth, who's the writer-producer of the film that we're talking about, which is Extraordinary, The Revelations. It's available at not only Amazon, but other locations as well that you can stream off of. We'll have all the links in the description of this show, so you can click on and watch the movie. Watch it more than once, because there's a lot of different topics that you're going to have to absorb And it's narrated by our friend Jimmy Church, who did an excellent job with the narration of the film. Also, lots of good friends are in the film as well. George Norrie is in the film. Richard Dolan's in the film. L.A. Marzulli's in the film. Man, just it's chock-a-block full of experts and some great people who weighed in on the lots of topics that will blow your mind. And there's lots in there to talk about, John. And lots of things to ponder as to, not just are we alone? I think we're way past that topic. It's a matter of, not just are we alone, but are we being taken over, or are we working alongside another race? So, Jon Sumple, I want to thank you very much, director producer of the film Extraordinary: The Revelations. I want to thank you so much for an engaging conversation, a good conversation today on Darkness Radio.
Yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'll come back anytime you ask.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, John. I want to thank everybody for a great week this week on Darkness Radio. I want to thank Beer City Bruiser for sitting on Supernatural News. Again, and True Crime Tuesday on Tuesday was another amazing episode as well with our guests there. And again, we look forward to another good week next week. I want you to be sure to subscribe. If you have not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe and rate and review us as well, either at Apple Podcast or the Google Play Store. We look forward to your reviews and rating us as well. We'd ask you to do that. For Jon Sumple, I'm Tim Dennis. Thank you very much for joining us here on the best in paranormal podcasting. This has been Darkness Radio.